I know you won't get slow down till the no good funky knuckle groove. Baby, 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 that'll help for you. Yeah, it's most definitely on a roof.
My name is Jonathan Healey. I work for Dayglo, and today we're going to be talking about live streaming in the music industry. Can I get a show of hands? How many people here have watched a live stream on YouTube? Will, can you get a shot, wide shot? Keep them up. And we're going to light it up too. Great. Keep them up if you've seen one on Facebook Live. So it's unanimous. I think if we did this a couple of years ago, we wouldn't have seen so many hands. Live streaming today is a valuable extension of brand marketing, and its content deemed valuable by fans. Kevin, can we see the first slide? Thought we'd start this with a couple stats. 80% of audiences would rather watch a live video from a brand than read a blog. See the next one? Thanks. 82% of audiences prefer live video from a brand compared to a social post. Go to the next one. Mobile video consumption rises 100% every year, according to YouTube. Ted just corrected me, it's actually 130%. Live video is outpacing the growth of other types of online video with a 113% increase in ad growth yearly. I think we have one more. 100 million plus internet users watch online video every day. And next year, 80% or 4/5 of the world's internet traffic will be video. With online video and live streaming becoming the driving content type and selling tool in today's online market, we've invited a panel of experts here who specialize in live streaming and music. So please welcome Ted Kartzman from YouTube, Jake, yeah, give him a hand. Jake Saxbe from TourGigs, Brad Serling from Nugsnet, and David Onigman from JamBase. Ted, in the past, video production, let alone live broadcasting, was not accessible to everyone. Your company, YouTube, has changed that dramatically. Live streaming is a button push on your phone, and it's just really easy to do now. Describe the live streaming trends YouTube has seen over the years, and tell us why YouTube has put so much importance into it.
Well, my story starts well before YouTube. When I was at Dave's company, we started JamBase, the dream was to not only have articles about what happened at last night's shows, but eventually have audio from last night's shows, and eventually have video from last night's shows. Who knew 20 years ago that it would be on your phone, and your camera would be your phone, and every single person in the room would have one? It was really a challenge back in the day. I don't know if anybody remembers Digital Club Network. That was about 20 years ago when I was living in Manhattan, and I was so excited by the potential of shows being live streamed. But if you looked a little bit closer and saw the trucks outside and the internet and the ISDN lines that had to be installed, and it was almost like a novelty. You know, it was like exciting, but how could you scale that? How could you grow that, right? But the philosophy was always, okay, well, internet bandwidth's going to get better over time. Cost of content creation got to go down over time as cameras get cheaper, and now look at what you do. You direct entire live streams from a single seat because you have robotic cameras and you have remote controls, and it's really grown. YouTube really helped explain sort of to the masses, right? You had huge events like Coachella, right? That's a seminal YouTube live stream event that people know, and this year, I mean, it was very hard to wake up that Monday after the first weekend of Coachella and not know what happened, and YouTube was really the reason why. But there's different ways that YouTube's sort of grown it, right? Even in the pay-per-view instance, right? It's not really a thing that YouTube does, but YouTube was there for you guys for fairly well and helped, kind of be the web pay-per-view element of that ridiculously amazing event. And today, YouTube is basically a platform, and it's grown beyond what I think anyone could have imagined. It's about 20,000 plus live streams every day. I've seen days where it's double that. In a week, there's hundreds of thousands of live streams that happen on YouTube. It's not all music, but as we grow and as we develop relationships with promoters, festivals, venues, I can see that being really streamlined, and we can have that dream that Andrew out there once had a dream. Let's have SportsCenter top 10 for last night's shows, and basically see every jam. That was sort of, I mean, if that's something we can aspire to, I think we'll be in pretty good shape. But really, in our world of live music, nobody has moved the needle for the couch tour like some of the luminaries on this panel. So I think it's probably best to turn the floor over.
Thanks. So we'll turn it to Jake here. In addition to running TourGigs, which a lot of you know through Humphreys McGee, who is touring and doing live streaming every single night, you spend an equal amount of time working on the ground in production. A few years ago, webcasting an Humphrey show probably required multiple camera operators, lots of gear, serious bandwidth capabilities, and more. How has that all changed now?
We'll still do an Humphrey show like a Red Rock show with a full crew, but when we're touring throughout the year, we can get it down to one director and one camera operator and up to 8 to 10 cameras. Some of those are remote operated, but for the most part, I think the crowd doesn't know the difference a lot of the time, whether you have 10 people on camera or 2. And you know, Jonathan at the Capitol Theater can run an operation by himself with some remote cameras and sometimes not even a camera guy on the ground. What we've found is that you can't do that right away, but if a band or a venue invests in the production, after a while you can get away with having a lot less camera operators. So yeah, I think that as we move forward, the cost of doing this is decreasing, and you definitely don't need a production truck to do a festival. We just did Shaky Knees Festival last year. We ran the IMAGs, did a lot of production. We did it with just our normal setup that we would have on an Humphreys McGee show, and I thought it looked great. I think that the most important thing when you're doing a production is getting the artist or the venue comfortable with you know, you being on stage, you being around the stage. My partner is Danny Clinch, who's a photographer, and Trey Allen, who's a tour manager for bands like My Morning Jacket. And for us, it's important for the band to be comfortable with us on stage, because if it's a film crew that's just going to come in and step on top of the production, you're not going to get good shots. They're going to tell you to move your camera. I mean, they're going to tell you that anyway, no matter, you know, what your connection is with the band. But if you can kind of get in there and they're comfortable, that's when you get your shot, and you don't need a ton of camera guys to do it. You just need one camera and their trust.
So I think some of the common trends here that we're seeing is over time and more recently that staffing needs have come down. The footprint to do production is lower. The cost is much lower than it was, but the quality still remains the same. I want to kind of redirect this a little bit and sort of talk about the consumer side. We spent a lot of time talking about the industry side of this, and I'll throw it out to you first, Brad. How's the perception of webcasting and live streaming changed? You've been in this for several decades now. Consumer perception, because I think if I'd asked you this question 20 years ago, the common response in your customer service is, I got to plug the computer into what?
Yeah, well, we used to have to do a lot of explaining, a lot of hand-holding, what it means to watch a show on a computer. We have to explain that to the band first and foremost, and they would say, well, why would somebody do this? Just because they can, that doesn't mean that we should do it. Whereas now, it's expected. You know, everyone assumes that something's going to be live streamed, and the technology's evolved to the point. It's just more accessible. You know, it's the barrier to entry for the casual fan. You know, it's a no-brainer between AirPlay and Chromecast and you know, native TV apps, smart TVs, Apple TV, all those things. Just make it so much easier. It's no big deal. You know, especially with YouTube built into a smart TV. It's, you know.
I think the phrase streaming is an everyday lexicon now. It's not a foreign.
Well, there's also the Netflix effect. I mean, now Netflix is TV. It's you know, it's where people are going to find something new and something interesting and compelling to watch instead of broadcast TV. So concert streaming, you know, a lot of the way has been paved by Netflix, just by that method of consumption not being foreign to an average home user.
David, what kind of trends do you see on, you know, working with JamBase more on the PR side and seeing, you know, how fans interact with live streaming and how, we'll say, reporters interact.
Yeah, certainly. So, like Brad was saying, I think sort of the most interesting trend, I think, is the native TV side of things. You know, just anecdotally, me personally, I'm way more likely to tune in to, you know, the second set of a show that's being webcast after I put my kid to bed, if it's a button on my Apple TV, you know. And, you know, on JamBase, sort of every time we announce a webcast, it's just kind of a template where we just fill in the info and publish it. And if you look back at the older ones, or the ones like when Scotty B was running a hidden track, it was always get your S-video cable out and get your RCA to mini stereo, you know, thing out, and all that stuff that Ted was talking about those early DCN shows. You know, from the higher ground and all that stuff. It was a chore, and now it's just so easy. And certainly sort of on the media publishing side, you know, all pro shot video content is good, and it feeds the beast, and, you know, it gives us something to write about the show the next day. You know, and when it's, you know, even better, like when, you know, there's VOD available right away, you know. So, you know, anything that's still up on Facebook Live or YouTube from like the preview, you know, the first tune of it is free, and then you tune in via the pay-per-view. We love that stuff because that gives us something to write content around the next day. So more live streams means more pro shot video, and, you know, the sooner that stuff is available on VOD for us, the better, because, you know, once the show is 2 days old, it's kind of old news to us right now. So fan shot video from Instagram or Facebook or YouTube is good, but we love it when we have that pro shot stuff. You know, when publicists or bands ask, you know, how can I get, you know, more coverage of my band on JamBase? Like, the answer is get your set list out there so we know what you played, who played on what, and make sure there's some media available, either audio or video. So, you know, the live streaming, you know, more of these things coming up just makes it easier and easier for us to cover these bands and get more interest in the next night's show and the next time the band comes around.
Do you find the video somewhat validates the review?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you know, without media, a review, especially if it's just like a recap of someone that wasn't at the show, is like, this happened, trust us. You know, like, it's not, you know, it's not especially interesting. You know, like a text, you know, recap of the show is not really article worthy these days, unless like something really crazy went down and we just can't find media anywhere. So yeah, I think it absolutely validates, you know, what you're writing about, and it sort of helps this stuff write itself.
So I'm going to digress for one quick second. We've mentioned DCN twice, and I think all five of us are dating ourselves immensely when we talk about it. But I think for the benefit of everybody here, maybe Ted, or anyone can speak about it, but maybe just explain what DCN was. It was the Digital Club Network, and then maybe describe what went into producing that.
Well, I should probably hand it to someone more technical, but the concept was Digital Club Network, and you'd go and you'd wire these clubs. But
what year was this?
2001, 2000?
99, 2000?
Around in like 98 and 99.
Yeah, I feel like it was.
I remember the first Trey Band show.
Back in the turn of the century.
Was a webcast on DCN.
And, you know, what I don't know, I can't even speak to the volumes of technical infrastructure that had to hurdle, but I do remember specifically trying to do a show at the beginning of JamBase and talking about that and understanding that the venue we were talking to had a 300 baud like dial-up line at that point, and so it was like, okay, yeah, we'll just bring in some internet, and it started to get to thousands of dollars for the show, or involving knocking down walls and running entirely new line, and that was cost prohibitive for just trying to do a one-off, right? Can you speak to any more?
That just reminded me, in the fall of '96. I ran a phone line down the center aisle of the Capitol Theater. It was before the Capitol Theater was redone. And it was Mo and Medeski. It was literally a phone line running down the center aisle, under the stage, plugged into some jack, and I had my laptop at the back of the house next to the soundboard. It was an audio cybercast is what we called it. And Mo was one of the first bands we ever did a cybercast with. Yeah, it was crazy, but that's what it took. You literally had to, I did it at the Wetlands actually it was another Mo show. We ran a phone line around.
So how's that evolved? So you're going from a 300 baud modem, jestfully saying, but now what are you seeing in the venues now? How's that evolved?
Well, we went from 1 phone line to 8 phone lines. We built a road case that would multiplex 8 phone lines together, which would basically get you ISDN speed. That was like the next level back in the mid-90s. That was all you could get, because you couldn't call up AT&T and say, hey, I need to drop in fiber for, they look at you like you were crazy. So now, thankfully, all these venues have been upgraded, all the Live Nation venues, all the sheds, all the clubs. And now the challenge is the cable modem, as I'm sure Jake can agree with me. The cable modem is the wild card. Everyone says, oh yeah, I've got 200 megs. But on a cable modem, it's 200 megs down, maybe it's 10 or 20 megs up, but it's not consistent, and it's usually shared by the whole house. So you still, even though the bandwidth is more available now, you still need a fixed, dedicated line to do a live broadcast. Now you can get by with whatever the venue has, but you just need to be aware that it's likely to get hosed when all the fans come into the room and start using the Wi-Fi. And,
So, Jake, since you spent so much time doing production and you're in a lot of rooms, let's say there's a venue owner here or a GM that's sort of looking to say maybe we should be doing some live streaming in our room. What are 3 to 5 key factors you would recommend to that club owner?
Well, internet for sure. We're finding when we go into venues these days that the internet is sufficient to get the live stream out, where a year ago that wasn't necessarily the case. We're seeing within the last few months most venues having 50 megs, 100 megs up, so that's good. But I think the dream of having like every show broadcast has to start with the venues investing in the gear rather than a crew like ours coming in with our gear, setting it up after the band sets up, and then we pull it right after and we try to get out of there, and it just kind of makes a mess. But if the gear is installed in the venue and there's a hard line to that encoder, it makes it really easy for the band and for production companies like ours to just basically walk in and plug into that system. And that can be done now for $10,000 to basically put cabling and an encoder into a venue. For another $3,000, you can start adding PTZ cameras that are permanent, and then production companies like ours can step in with camera operators and basically just plug in. So I think that the dream of having all of these venues wired isn't going to be done by one company. It kind of has to be done by the venues themselves. They invest in that. The venues will get PR. They'll be able to have a lot of content on publications like yours. The bands will be able to put the first couple songs on Facebook. And I mean, at the end of the day, I think our goal is to cover. I mean, I know there are events, Fish and Dead & Company that are making probably a lot of money, but a lot of the bands that are kind of coming into venues like the Brooklyn Bowl might not sell 1,000 tickets. But if you can sell 50 tickets or 100 tickets and make $1,000, you can cover the $300 that it costs to bring in the camera guys and the director. And the band gets the best promotion they can get on Facebook. Publication like yours gets the content the next day. It makes sense.
Well, we're actually running a pilot program with 2 venues, including Capitol Theater and the Independent on the West Coast. I want to echo exactly what you said. It's about the venue sort of having that vision, and I credit Brooklyn Bowl, Capitol Theater, Pete Shapiro specifically for having that vision. I mean, this room was wired correctly when it was started, well in advance of where we are today, right? And so working with the venue to sort of see what that potential is and invest whatever it takes, because you're right, it's not $1 zillion. It's enough to get it going, and you're creating goodwill, right? On YouTube, you can have subscribers, you can build your brand, you can build followers on YouTube. So the more that you do, I did a little research and checked out different social networks, right? YouTube's a social network, and you can post whatever you'd like on there as far as video. People follow you, and there's a way to track, there's a way to basically grow that marketing channel as well as grow content for PR, and as well as, basically you're building a brand and you're doing it on a couple levels. I hope I didn't go into the next question with that.
We're good. We're good. I think it is important. You know, at our businesses, at Brooklyn Bowl, at the Capitol Theater, we do it all. We do pay-per-view. We're doing free webcasts. We're building subscriber bases on YouTube. We're capturing emails. We're doing all that stuff. I think this would be a good time to kind of segue more. Let's look at sort of like the financials here. Kevin, I got one more slide up there. If I had a nickel for every time I told an agent this, but here it comes. 60% of live video viewers are more likely to buy a ticket to a concert or an event after watching a live video of that event or a similar one. So we do see this a lot. We do see how webcasting does have an inherent value in your show promotions, whether it's getting the word out ahead of time, people still like to buy tickets for it, or if you want to play the long game and say, you know, Max Sabbath is coming to your venue and someone watches a live stream of that, they might come to your venue the next time after seeing the live stream. So I want to talk to Brad a little bit. He started Nugs in 1993, and it was really, I don't know, a hobby to sort of ease your tape trading habit, and then you formalized it in 2002 with your partner John Richter. In my opinion, you've been at it for some of the longest time, and you've sort of seen it all. How has live streaming bolstered revenue for artists, venues, and brands?
Well, I think to get to your point of the ticket sales, you know, at first it seems counterintuitive, particularly to the promoter who's putting up the cash in the first place for the show. But it's going to sell tickets down the road, if not for that event in and of itself. I'm thinking of Dead & Company last summer when we did about half the shows were pay-per-views, and then we decided to do 2 full shows as free streams. But every night that we weren't doing the full show, we did the first 3 songs for free on the band's Facebook Live and YouTube channels. And incrementally throughout the tour, we saw a build-up at the walk-up box office sales. By the time the band got to Wrigley to close out the tour, it was the highest walk-up, as far as I know, at any Wrigley concert. And they saw a direct correlation between the live streams we were doing every night, the huge audiences we were amassing on Facebook and YouTube, and then the eventual walk-up at the end of the tour. So it's, you know, that was like the perfect circle. And granted, it's the Dead, and that's the kind of pushback I get from other artists outside of this scene is, oh, well, that's the Dead, or that's Fish, you know, that's not going to work for us. But then you look at a band like Metallica. You know, Metallica doesn't need to be doing webcasts, but they decided to go live for 54 nights last summer, not live of the show, but live of the band rehearsing before they walked on stage. And the reason we did that was actually as a marketing tool for the live download. So we've been releasing every note Metallica plays live since 2004, you know, hundreds of shows. Last summer, every show, when you were sitting in the venue, we would put up a live Metallica URL on the screens, and the fans at the show could watch the band rehearsing before they came on. And then you had to put in your email in order to get the stream. So it was a free stream, but you had to put in your email, and then we would, you know, immediately email those fans and say, hey, here's a link to buy the recording of tonight's show. So it's not just a live stream to sell tickets or a live stream to have pay-per-view revenue. It's also a tool for other things like driving sales of merch, of certainly the recording of that show if a band is releasing every night. There's just a nice ecosystem to keep the fans involved. And that's, you know, I use Metallica as an example because they're not Fish. They're not the Dead. You know, the shows, thankfully, they have mixed up 8 out of 20 songs since we've been working with them. They used to play the same show every night on the tour until 2004. They started mixing it up once we started live Metallica.
Didn't you do something similar with Zac Brown Band?
Yeah, so Zac Brown's another good example where we did 2 shows 2 summers ago at Fenway, and the band made a point of not repeating a song over the 2 nights, which I think they had never done anything like that, purposely not repeating a song. So they marketed the webcast as that, you know, a no repeat weekend, and it did very well. The next year, last year, we did 12 nights with them, and there was not as much variation. So it did really well on Facebook, not as well as a pay-per-view. But what it proved to us was the Facebook reach was so huge, and YouTube as well. It was overwhelming how large the Facebook audience was for the free streams, that by the end of the tour sponsor came to us and said, well, wait a minute, why don't we do this as a sponsorship opportunity? And so now that's what we're pursuing for this summer, is those types of arrangements where bands that aren't necessarily going to garner a big paid audience have a huge opportunity to reach fans and have it be a sponsored event.
So really, if you can get Brad in the ear of these bands, we can get more of them mixing up their set lists every night.
Exactly.
So like live streaming as a way to get the rest of the live music ecosystem on board with the fact that there is tremendous value in not programming your entire set and doing it. And I was kind of a joke, but Brad really did sort of have some influence, and sort of the existence of the live stream had some influence on the show itself, which is fascinating.
And likewise, there's probably a bunch of people that wouldn't go for it and would never go for it because they do the same show. And I understand that's part of the music business too. You craft your 75-minute set, you go out there, you nail it, and if you live stream it, and I'm psyched to see you in 2 weeks when you come to my town, and it's the same thing, I understand why bands say no to this. I don't know if you've had any of that experience either.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there was a funny story of that Metallica tour. The last night happened to be right after the Baker's Dozen. So they're in the rehearsal room, and we're streaming this live, and Kirk says to Lars and James, hey, did you guys hear about this Fish thing at the Garden where they played 13 nights and didn't repeat a song? And total silence, and James says, they didn't repeat a song in 13 nights? How many songs is that? 200-some songs? We could never do that. That would be a nightmare for us. Because first of all, how could Metallica play a show and not play Enter Sandman? I mean, people would riot. It would be like the Eagles not playing Hotel California. There's certain bands that have to at least have a segment of their show that's the same. But that doesn't mean that you can't live stream the show. You're strategic about when you do it, and you should make something special about that show, so it's not the Cleveland show every night. And there's certain things like we did, Bruce Springsteen playing The River. The River didn't change every night, but there was the second part of the show was where he mixed it up. Roger Daltrey playing Tommy. Tommy does not change. It's always exactly the same. It's queued up to the video, but then there's some stuff he played at the end that was different.
I love in that Metallica thing, it was Lars or someone just had to throw a little cold water on it. They were like, wow, 13 nights. There's a lot of covers, though. They played a lot of covers.
There's a lot of covers, yes.
So to sort of surmise that, I think it's about putting something out there that's special, giving something that's exclusive, and making it unique in the cases where it may be a band that kind of does play the same set every night, whereas a band like Fish or any of the other jam bands like Umphreys, there's so much variety going on. But I have a question for you, Jake. I think a lot of promoters and managers kind of look for the immediate ROI. So they, when I have these conversations, how much do you think this is going to make in pay-per-view? Or how many emails are we going to get? Or, what's my reach going to be? What are some other ways to sort of extend value to the video production itself beyond the immediacy of the live stream?
We try not to influence. I mean, I think it's a great idea to ask the band to change up their sets, but that's a tall order for most bands, especially if they don't have the content. But we work for the bands, and we try to stay out of the way and not really not make a production out of their show. We want to just kind of capture as best we can the show as it would exist in the venue, try to get the vibe of the venue. But as I've said, the cost of production is going down to the point where even if a band is playing the same set every night, it might make sense to record every show, not stream every show, but you have the archive. We can store the data a lot easier now and bring up multi-cameras. So, a year later, a month later, you can make a film. You can do a compilation from a bunch of different shows and make a film. The artist can, be heading to Tulsa, and they can pop up like the last Tulsa show that they played 5 years before and pull a song from that and use that to promote ticket sales. When we started, we didn't live stream. We were selling DVDs, and we would try to turn them around within a month. And then we tried to turn them around within a week. And now that live stream is the current thing, we have to get them out within a day. And as you've said, like after 2 days, it's old news. So the idea that we're going to go and cut a film and wait a month, the band has done 10 other shows since then. So, but with that said, we're still making movies. We just filmed a movie at the Capitol Theater last weekend with Government Mule, and we did a Pearl Jam film last year that did really well. So our focus is to try to not just, it's not on live streaming. It's on live stream is one component of getting an archive for the band, of making a film, of promotion, you know, and I think that when you add all of those things up, yeah, I mean, the immediate ROI from a live stream is kind of irrelevant. We're looking to cover with the live stream. We're looking to cover our production with the live stream. And then once we have the content and we're partnered with the band, we can try to find ways to make money down the line.
So Ted, YouTube, you know, has the free component. It has paid as well, subscription. It's somewhat ironic to say, how do you find the value in free? But talk about how brands or bands or venues can find value in free streams on YouTube.
You know, I mentioned before about subscribers to YouTube. I'm sure you've been to YouTube and checked out an artist page, and you can subscribe and get information on that artist. Well, if you've been to the Relix videos page, you can subscribe to that too. So it's not just artists that can have YouTube pages. You know, it can be brands, it can be venues, it can be promoters, and that's another marketing channel for you. So, right, we've talked about trying to figure out ways to drive traffic across. You know, we've got artists that post on Twitter that say, hey, follow me on YouTube because I'm going to go live over there, right? And so you want to be in all the social platforms that you possibly can, but YouTube's a place that you could monetize. You know, and working with you guys, you're up 500% on subscribers. You don't...
Can we see that slide, Kevin? This is where I pat myself on the back.
I made this for you because it's true, right? When we started working together, your subscribers, I think we started talking about 18 months ago. You were well under 10,000 subscribers. We got approaching lock-in. We talked about additional content, interviews, other things. I mean, if you look at what makes a YouTuber successful, it's a cadence of posting. It's regular posting. It's regular communication with your audience, and it's something you've done. I mean, what have we done, like 100 different videos in the last year? I mean, it's a significant amount of work that you've put in, but now you're 5x where you were last year, and that can only grow. You know, you have more and more venues, festivals, different ways that you can possibly get in there. So if you're out there and you're a venue or a promoter, there's no reason you can't have your own YouTube page, and you can start to grow it. And if you want to talk about, you know, music rights and that sort of thing, I'll be right over there later. We can have a deep dive. I did grab a couple more stats for you. Because of that cadence of regularity that we talked about, we can show that channels that live stream weekly see an average 40% increase in their new subscribers and a 70% increase in their watch time. Right? People are used to going to you. It's mind-blowing how many of these YouTube stars, how many subscribers they have, and you look at what they do, and some of it's not entirely the most interesting for everybody, but it's regular, and they're there, and there's something you rely on. The same way maybe older people rely on talk shows every night, or the news. It's something, you know that person's going to talk to you, and that's something that you enjoy, so you go back. And before you know it, you're going back, and you're like, you're going every day, and I would really rather people go back and see live music than like people watching other people play video games, which is weird to me.
It's big. Live streaming video games.
It's a thing.
It's a big thing.
Yeah, I don't know how that is.
So another thing I get asked a lot, really just by Pete, is subscription modeling, and I want to talk to you about this, Brad, because you have a subscription-based app where people can subscribe, but maybe talk about the merits of subscription, but try to tie it into live streaming and where you feel or you don't feel live streaming fits into the subscription model.
Well, I feel live streaming, when it's truly live, and this is a case I make to managers a lot, the most valuable asset an artist has is the 3 hours in the room with their fan. You know, certainly if you've got a great song catalog, if you're the Beatles or Bruce Springsteen, you know, but your ticket sales, so that's your primary revenue stream. So what is the most valuable to the fan? Is that time in the room when they're with you because they bought a ticket, or they can't be with you and they'll pay to watch it live. So I feel that a live stream for a band that can support that kind of audience, that is a premium event, and it should not be part of a subscription. There's also a logistical component to that. it's hard to say how many shows you're going to stream. So how do you build a subscription model if you can't present the value proposition to the customer? You know, we do webcasts all the time. We do them with you. We do them with bands directly like Fish, and we don't know how many webcasts we're going to have. With the exception of Dead and Company, I know we'll do 24 nights this summer. That's the only time I know. But even that, we're not doing it as a subscription. It's a la carte feature on top of a subscription. So there's a subscription for the audio because that we do know. We do know we'll have the audio every night from all of these bands that we work with. So there's a very basic subscription for that. It's an easy to understand, easy to swallow value to the fan. I'm going to pay $12.99 a month. I'm going to get every show Widespread Panic plays, every Pearl Jam show, every Humphrey show. You know, it makes total sense. And then the pay-per-view is a one-off a la carte that you can buy from within the subscription app. So you already have the fan there coming every night to hear last night's show from their favorite bands, and then you upsell them the pay-per-view. Now, I think subscription makes sense on a VOD basis, but the challenge there is the rights, which Teddy will talk to you over there in the corner about. When it's on YouTube or it's on Facebook, somebody's taking care of the rights ostensibly, and we don't need to take that deep dive into how the sync licenses work. But if it's a band, you know, let's take Fish. We recently added video to the Live Fish subscription. There's only 2 shows in there. It's not because Fish doesn't want to put out more video. It's because the time it takes to clear the licenses, like if we did the Baker's Dozen, as Metallica thankfully pointed out, there were so many covers, the time it would take to license all the sync licenses to get that in a subscription program. Or
Dead and Company, where everything is basically a cover because of the rights.
With Dead and Company, every single song is a cover. So it's challenging. It doesn't mean it can't be done, and we're working on some blanket licenses to allow us to do this, but until the licenses have been cleared, you can't really build a viable SVOD service for live concerts. That's why the only thing you really see in the market right now is Quello, because that's all pre-licensed content. That's content that's been cleared for other uses, and been cleared for DVD, been cleared for cable or DirecTV. So we'll get there, but until that point, it's really hard to build a subscription VOD service for music, and subscription for pay-per-view. I just don't think it makes sense, even if the rights weren't an issue, because I think that's a premium. Look at wrestling. Do
you have anything to add on that, Jake? Especially with you're doing so many streams with Humphreys. Where do you see TourGigs going with this?
Well, I agree. Like the subscription, the idea of a subscription is you have their credit card and it's recurring, so they forget that they're subscribing to you and they just keep paying you, and that's like the key to these subscription models. That's hard to do when you don't know how many shows the band is going to do. We've tried a service where we'll charge a certain amount for 30 shows, like a certain tour or a couple tours combined. But then the payments stop after, they make a one-time payment, or they can break it up over time, but it's not recurring. So that the idea of the value of the subscription model doesn't really apply to just charging them for 30 shows. I think that subscription is just one. I mean, you had downloads. Now people aren't downloading stuff anymore and purchasing downloads. So you have pay-per-view, and then there's the idea of subscription. Well, it's not really. Subscription doesn't really apply to us right now, but who knows if it will even be the thing in 5 years? So we're kind of looking to other kind of outlets, not just subscription.
It seems like there's a couple lessons here, right? You talk about recency and immediacy. There's value in that. And you talk about brands that are beyond, the developing band, Fish, Dead & Co. These have value. You're able to charge either per show or, in theory, per tour, or, be able to do something because it's an amazing show, right? These are lessons as if you're out there and you're trying to think about what your model is for live streaming, But to get going, it's all about building brand, getting PR value out of it. So, you kind of have to start somewhere and crawl before you can walk and walk before you can run, and that's where the free platforms come in.
Well, let's talk about that for a sec, because you and I were talking the other day about this and how there's a lot of distribution channels now. When we do something at the Capitol Theater right now, when we're doing this, it's we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook Live, maybe we're on Nugs as well. I think it would be important, we were talking about this, to talk about the importance of distributing your content to multiple channels simultaneously.
Yeah, I mean, we're actually working with an agency with First Tube Media, and he kind of showed when we put on some of these live streams in venues, and I've seen the light of live streaming on Facebook and driving traffic from Facebook. Facebook pins your live stuff to the top of the feed, but ultimately the value, I would say, is on YouTube with the subscribers and the business model of YouTube. But there's no reason that you can't use A to drive to B, right? We talk to artists, we teach artists about the YouTube mobile live product, which is, you know, I've seen artists go live from backstage, similar to how Metallica did. It's very lo-fi, right? You can just do it with your phone. The highest tech version is like an iPad on a tripod or something like that, you know, but you can actually do it and you can kind of go live mobily, and that sort of gets people into, whoa, this is my favorite artist, and they're just going live and talking to me about stuff. But driving people from places. YouTube isn't as big as maybe Facebook or Twitter in terms of where bands have activated in the past. So get them to drive from, tweet something and say, hey, I'll be live, I'm going to go mobile live at YouTube and sometime in the next 48 hours from somewhere in the world. Make it mysterious, right? And then people want to subscribe. You've got to teach them what to do. That's why you see so many YouTube videos that say, subscribe here. You know, there's end cards that literally tell people what to do and how to drive people. Because, look, you're in the business of growing your reach, and you want to grow that reach wherever, on at least the major social networks, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of different ways to leverage that too. I mean, we do it all the time. So it's, you know, pushing that freebie out to Facebook and then migrating viewers either from there to purchase a pay-per-view, or I've done it a lot with our free streams where we'll tease it on Facebook Live and then drive people to subscribe on YouTube. I think we're getting pretty close for questions. I'll leave it open for any final remarks from you guys.
I think that technically, and you know this, it's easy to simulcast to 10 different destinations. You can simulcast to YouTube, to 3 different Facebook accounts, the bands, the venues, and you know, on top of that, you know, you make it embeddable so you can take that live stream and put it anywhere after it kind of goes into one spot. So technically, the software it makes it very simple to stream the first couple songs or the full show to multiple destinations at the same time.
I don't really have a stat for this, but I just see it firsthand. We do see good, I'll call it a migration rate of people who, they're starting on one channel and you're flashing them a card, or you're flashing them what we call lower third, and saying, hey, to continue watching this live stream, you know, go to relixchannel.com or go to Nugs or go whatever, and we see the numbers and people migrate, you know, whether it's 50, 60%. Any other final statements before we go to the floor for questions? All right. So, good morning, everyone. Alec over here has a microphone if you just want to raise your hand and ask any questions.
Thank you. I heard an interview a couple of years ago with a filmmaker who said that he never felt that movie theaters would ever go away, even with Netflix, you know, video on demand and all this kind of thing. And now we're seeing tons and tons of movie theaters close. So, you know, I heard everything that you said about, you know, live streaming and how it actually kind of creates buzz, it creates ticket sales. But with that said, I mean, are you at all concerned that, you know, this live streaming experience is going to, you know, keep people from going to shows in the future? Thanks a lot.
I think my kids keep me from going to shows, right? And that's what is great about live streams, but there is nothing like a live concert. That is church for people like us. You know, we go to shows to be with like-minded people and to see something bigger and to be around and feel that energy, that spirit. That's what it's all about. But when I can't do that because I got change diapers all night, then I would love to do that over a Portugal the Man live stream from the Capitol. That was really fantastic last year. You know, that's the next best thing, but come on, there's nothing like a show.
I can tack onto that too. I think there's certain types of music that, you know, don't work well on the live stream. I think, you know, I don't want to pigeonhole certain genres, but I'm about to. So, I think funk music is about being in the room. I think, you know, New Orleans brass, party music, things like that. I think people want to be in the room to actually experience, and sometimes that stuff doesn't translate. So, you know, is live music and live places going to go away? I don't think so.
Yeah, I certainly think it's a justified fear about what he's saying about movie theaters, but I think done the right way, like a live stream is supposed to get you more excited about being there next time, and getting this great pro shot footage for a band and things like that. Me and Teddy talk about it all the time. Every time a new sort of band that has a guitar is getting popular, we're like, yes, another generation of live rock and roll is going to survive this thing. But I think, in certain shots of a webcast, like, when they're zoomed out and show the energy of a room and things like that is something, a point that, like, this video should get somebody more excited about going to church, about going to see live music.
And you mentioned movie theaters too. We did the Fairly Well broadcast about 3 years ago, and it was, the largest music pay-per event in history. And we did that in theaters, and we did that in theaters globally, and people traveled to theaters. And I think the big reason they did that, especially in the Deadhead culture, was community. People wanted to go and be with like-minded people and share and communicate with each other, and also experience the music of the Grateful Dead. And that was a different situation where those shows had sold out, but that's different going to a movie theater than it may be watching it on your couch. I see another question over here.
Hey guys, Josh Barron from the Lupa. Two unrelated questions. One, what are the pros and cons of potentially geofencing streams to assuage fears of cannibalizing actual ticket sales? Is that possible? And two, one of the things we've heard a lot about over the last 12 to 18 months is virtual reality. What impact would that have, or do you see it having on what you guys do day in, day out?
Okay, let's take that in two parts. Can you guys speak to blackout restrictions at all?
Yeah, we when I mentioned that Metallica tour last summer doing the 54 shows, we started out with the band wanted us to geofence it only to, they wanted to get as narrow as the venue, so only the people in the show could see the band warming up before that show. Did that about 2 or 3 nights and then just said screw it, because we realized we wanted to reach a larger audience. Why limit it to that? It is technically possible. It's, I just wonder what's the value in that. It's not like baseball where, you're not going to broadcast it if the show's not sold out.
I would say from a rights perspective, you can set rights by territory, but not as granularly as like by state. So if you're talking about a global tour, you can keep it, right? We did a humongous Korean live stream with tons of Korean bands that was not allowed to be live streamed in Korea. But they wanted to do it global ex-Korea because it was a huge moment for the sponsor and that whatever, but the way that the rights worked, and that was great for them, but nobody could see it locally. So it's possible, but not as granular as the state level.
And then I think the second part to that was VR. And Josh, are you asking where we see the trend going? Do you still have a mic?
Just the impact of it. I mean, again, we keep hearing about it, but we don't see it from a consumer perspective, wide adoption, from a production perspective, necessarily wide adoption. Like, is it going to enhance the concert experience at home? Like, how close are we to that actually happening? And do you guys think about that at all?
Yeah, we've experimented with it quite a bit. We did a Bon Jovi concert and we thought it was going to be great and we're going to stick these VR cameras everywhere. But when you stick the headset on and it's a 360 camera, I mean, you're just going to want to look at Bon Jovi. Like, you're going to turn around and look at the housewives from Jersey, like in the front row. Like, it's not that interesting to have 360 in a concert experience, because in a concert experience, you're looking at one place. So we're working with a company, Endless Rift, to kind of develop some stuff that I think is cool, where we'll put the 2D film on a screen, so you're in a virtual theater, but you kind of create three-dimensional lights, like you're kind of recreating the lighting rig. So the lights are kind of going, around you, rather than watching kind of the 2D video, like with a 360 camera, which is not that interesting. So I think VR, I mean, gaming is very big in VR because you're in a 3D world, but when you're videoing something, it's flat in VR. So I think the cooler thing is to add three-dimensional elements, effects, lighting, flying pigs, whatever, to kind of make it more interesting, and that's where VR, I think, is going to go.
We've tried it a bunch. We've done it at Lock-In. We've done it at the Cap, and the way we've approached VR, not very successfully though, is through 360 video. And as a director, it's a struggle because, not to get like too granular about it, but you can only have so many places to put it, right? So if you put it in front of the drummer, then you're looking at the backs of the guitarists, and then you're looking at the drummer. Or if you put it in the front row, it does become sort of a two-dimensional spatial plane because you're either looking at the stage or looking behind. The areas where VR and 360 video get exciting is when you're in the cockpit of a jet plane, or you're in a race car. And it's that POV perspective, and you can look around, you can see what everybody's seeing, and you have the goggles on at home. But I have found personally it just hasn't translated. And I think to speak to what you were talking to, what's out there now in the VR space is basically like walking into this room and watching that screen over there. So it's like you walk in and there's avatars of people and there's like three-dimensional space, but at the end of the day, the video of the band is still 2D on the screen.
Right. I think there's a couple solutions, right? There's 360, which I'm kind of with you on the headset thing. It's inherently not social. You're wearing a headset that covers your entire plane of vision. But there's also VR 180, which I kind of like. You can put the camera, you can see the whole stage, you can kind of get some movement, but you don't really need to see the housewives from Jersey in the front row because that's not what you came to the concert to see, right? It may be, look, I would have loved to have a 360 camera at a Fugazi show, you know, and be able to see that crowd in the 80s and like, that would be an amazing place and time to go to. But for most shows, you just want to see what's on the stage. So I think that I think 180 is a decent solution. Josh, something to look into?
My concern with VR is the sound. You know, we put so much effort and money into making it sound good. Somebody turns their head, then you're starting to get things, you get phase shift and all, you know, time smear that really messes with what the band is trying to put out there, is making this show sound correct with proper, you know, placement of the musicians on the stage, the sound stage, and the depth. You know, you don't want to mess with that.
I think the cost just needs to come down to, I mean, everyone up here has been talking about just how inexpensive it is to put on a live stream and how much it's come down over the past 20 years. You know, who knows what the next 20 years is going to look like as far as, you know, virtual reality enhancements and things like that.
I feel like it's augmented reality. It's AR that's going to change the game when you could be playing on a stage with insert whatever you want here in 3D, right? There's already like AR stickers where you can be in the middle of the Star Wars set, right? That somebody's going to do that. It's going to be gimmicky. I mean, my money's on the dead, like recreating a full psychedelic trip inside.
Wait till you see drums in space this summer.
What?
So wait till you see drums in space this summer.
All right, I got to get out to a show.
We have any more questions?
Yeah. Aaron Bisman from Jazz Lincoln Center. Just a quick comment. We've been webcasting about 300 shows a year for 5 years now, and we've only seen ticket sales increase during that time. We have no geofencing. They're available anywhere. New York is our largest viewing market, so we're proud of that and happy to advocate for that. Brad, I have a question. You were talking about the numbers getting so large on the streams, I think around Metallica, that sponsors were beginning to show interest in sponsoring the live streams themselves. Could you say a little bit about what kind of numbers are we talking about? Like, what is the size of traffic that is required to really begin to interest sponsors?
Well, it has to be in the millions. You know, a lot of it depends directly, particularly on Facebook. It's how big is the band's following on Facebook. You know, Metallica has 37 million followers, so it's easy to have an incredible reach with just the tiniest little post. If you do a post that has the full show, you know, we did that tuning room thing, but then we did a full show at the close of the tour, and those numbers get up in the millions in terms of reach. In terms of concurrent live, while it's happening, it's in the hundreds of thousands while it's going on, and then, you know, over time, more people can watch on demand. You get into the millions. So, but from a sponsor's perspective, they're interested in the reach because that's like the impressions, how many eyeballs, that kind of thing. But I think that's the level you have to be at to attract real sponsor dollars. Typically, you can look at who's sponsoring the tour and just make it part of the tour budget. Yeah, that's what I think makes sense.
You should be able to aggregate that reach, Aaron, at 300 shows a year, right? You can use your standard advertising CPMs, and you know what you did this past year, so to look forward for next year, you actually can shop something fairly tangible to your potential sponsors.
Another question? And I know you've had your hand raised for a while. So one more up here, and then we'll come down here.
Sorry, the mic has stayed in this little ecosystem. Hey guys, Wayne Price from Airbnb Concerts. Quick question for you. Live rights for these shows were talked about. I understand SVOD is very expensive. Can you talk a little bit about the cost of live rights, just in general? For why is it cheaper? It seems like it's cheaper than SVOD, and is it different depending on the size of the artist? I mean, you guys talking about the Dead and Metallica, but what about at scale? What about mid-tier artists? Where do they play into it?
Well, the rights are the same no matter who the artist is. To do it live, it's considered an ephemeral license, so you couldn't, in most cases with the exception of a band playing the Super Bowl, it's not possible to pre-license, to get sync licenses for a potential cover song, because in most cases in our world, you don't know what the band's going to play. So how could you license something if you don't know what they're going to perform? So there's that, in the case of the Dead or Fish. For a band who knows their set list, they play the same thing every night, you could potentially license it ahead of time. But when it's truly live, it's not triggering another license. You've got the PROs being paid as part of the production, and so that applies to the live stream as well. After the fact is when it's a different story. Now, Teddy can speak about what happens when it's on YouTube or Facebook.
Right, I think you hit on something with the PROs. It's something we should talk about for Airbnb, right? Because there's a performance right. You're performing in a public place, and all the venues would have performance licenses. Your Airbnb venues, maybe not. That's something we could talk about and probably solve for. I tend to think with the artist on board, management on board, their label on board, their publisher on board, playing songs from within that suite of players, you should be able to pull off a live stream, and it really shouldn't cost a ton of money. I'm sure if somebody walks in or a brand walks in to a huge band and says, hey, we want to live stream this, I'm sure there's costs out the wazoo. You don't just do something with a popular universal music band without making sure there's some deal in place, right? But for what we've been talking about, you're talking about bands that are psyched that you're doing what they're doing. Umphreys hires you to do what you're doing. I have to think that it's, you know, there's a way around it, but we can talk and explain syncs and performance rights.
The way that I kind of explain it is, and I don't know if this is 100% correct, but a copyright is a copy, and a live performance or a live stream, there is no copy. So copyright law does not apply. So you need a performance license, which the venue might have, or your website, a website like YouTube would have, to stream it. But the band can cover whatever song that they want during the live stream. The second that a copy is made and it's recorded, that's when you have to go and get the sync license in order to play it on demand.
Right. And best practices on YouTube, we always say, hey, if you've got the rights, leave it up for VOD afterwards, because people find out about it tomorrow, the next day. Last week we did a Django live stream from the Independent at 10:30 on the West Coast. A lot of people missed it on the East Coast. More people missed it in the UK, where the band's from. It wasn't really a smash when you talk about concurrent viewers, but getting the rights to be able to leave it up for VOD, we've seen it do 10x in the next week, because people find out it was a great performance. The band knows they're being filmed. But yeah, it's different when you leave it up on VOD than when you're just making it live. And exactly what you said, you're not making a copy. You guys both nailed it.
And I think that's a really good important point, because we see this a lot on social media and we see it in the customer service emails, is will this be available as video on demand? And the consumers are saying video on demand after the event because they want to watch it on their time.
Well, let me jump in for a second. When we do the pay-per-views, and I think, Jake, you do the same thing, when you buy it, you're buying the right to watch it live while it's happening, but then we grant you 48 hours to watch it on demand. So there's a built-in DVR, which is particularly important for West Coast shows, like when we do those Vegas Brooklyn Bowl shows. They're not starting
Disco
until after.
Biscuits at 4 a.m.
Yeah, if you're living in New York.
Pacific time.
Yeah, so that is a key part of it. Also, like you're saying, you're putting your kids to bed, you missed the first set, you can go back and watch the first set later. So that's within the fair use of the copyright law, is you bought it to watch it live, but it's as if you recorded it on your own DVR to play back later. But then it expires. It doesn't stay.
Another question? Two more. We got two more questions, and then we'll move on to the next panel.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
Great job up there. My question is around the monetization of live streaming, and specifically around brand integration. and how it's evolving. I know, Brad, you mentioned around reach and brands want impressions. It's really evolving, and brands actually are really looking for engagement now. Specifically, Ted, maybe you want to talk a little bit about some good examples from your seat and how brands are integrating into these live streams in an effective way.
Well, I mean, the biggest example is Coachella, right? There's always a massive brand, and then you watch a small startup screen. That's really more of a custom solution, but for a big brand, big money, it's certainly worth doing. We see sponsor slates at the beginning. We see coming up soon, the so-and-so live stream brought to you by, and that's where I think you have an opportunity as a venue, as a promoter, as a festival. If you're gonna do multiple ones, in between, right? At Lock-In last year, it wasn't a sponsor, but it was really important to let people know what happened in Charlottesville and to donate. And that was the slate in between. That could have been a sponsor, but really it was us and you saying, hey, we care about what happened in Charlottesville, please donate here, and kind of getting awareness. But I see that being an opportunity. I see there's chats and things that happen, right? And there's a way to have moderated chats or pinned chats or, some way to bring a brand in there. I think you're right, it is really evolving, and there's probably more best practices than I even know, because I'm not so on the ad side. But I would love to deep dive with you on that later, Molly.
You know what might be helpful, though? Maybe give 3 top metrics, because we talk about them all the time, that would be beneficial to sponsors.
You mean metrics?
Yeah, average watch time, view count. Maybe the top 3 that are most important to
right.
sponsors.
I mean, I think people used to. I don't know. I think everyone thinks concurrence. How many people are watching at the same time? But with leaving it up for 48 hours, is it about the people watching at the same time, or is it about the total people that watched it? Right. We use things like views on YouTube, which people understand.
Yeah,
We've moved
views.
more. What?
Views.
Yeah, views is a better indicator than concurrence. And we use watch time on YouTube to actually sum up the total watch time. I think you could talk about average watch time or length of watch time. Everybody knows that watch time on Facebook is way smaller than on YouTube because people just scrolling through their Facebook feed. But YouTube, you go to something, you stay. I've seen experience of stuff we've done on 2 platforms be 10, 20x on YouTube.
But with Facebook, I'd say reach is the most significant in terms of sponsorship. Because it's how many people actually saw this come up in their newsfeed. How many people saw the sponsor message.
Yeah, these guys said it perfectly. I mean, those are the top metrics that I use all the time. And it is interesting. I can tell you from Facebook, our average watch time is very quick. We're talking seconds in the double digits. But then when you go to YouTube, it's like 16 minutes. So it does become more of a destination. We have time for one more question.
I'm Adam Paul. I've worked with a number of you guys up there. I'm CEO of 7 Cinematics. And my question, we specialize in the look, the feel, the actual production of it. Emmy-winning things that people love to watch, beautiful images. So tell me, my question is for Brad and Jake, are the robots going to take over? Do I have a job? Tell me what you think the place is for really humans making beautiful, creative images with the world of live streaming.
Make them with robots.
I mean, Healey's behind the PTZ cameras.
Are we sure Healey's not a robot?
I've been called that before.
And I think there's a good artistic style to doing productions without a camera operator. But yeah, I mean, you need humans on the stage to capture the vibe of the band. That's not going to change for stuff that you do.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of what's practical given the venue. When with stadium and arena tours, typically there's a whole video crew there to capture the show live, to put it up on the screens, and that's a mix of robos and handhelds. It depends on how big the room is, and that's how you decide how to deploy the technology. It's not, we're just going to go robo, because that's always going to be the best thing to do. It's what works for the room, what works for the event.
Okay, so that's going to do it for the live streaming panel. We thank you all for coming out so early in the morning to join us for this first panel. All of us will be here all day, so if you have more questions, please approach any of us. And thank you very much. Thank you, guys.